The rain wasn't falling, it was attacking. It slammed into the windshield in thick, violent sheets, turning the road into a moving wall of noise and blur. The wipers fought back in a steady rhythm, scraping water aside just long enough for the headlights to cut a narrow tunnel through the darkness. Thomas Hale leaned forward in his seat, both hands locked tight on the steering wheel. 57 years old, 29 years on the road, and still driving nights like this. He preferred it that way. Night driving meant fewer people, fewer conversations, fewer reminders that his house had been empty for 5 years now. The road didn't ask how he was holding up. It didn't care that his wife's side of the bed stayed cold. It just demanded attention. This stretch of highway barely existed on maps anymore. 2 lanes, no streetlights, forest pressing close on both sides, like it was trying to swallow the asphalt whole. The kind of road people trusted because it looked simple. The kind where mistakes disappeared quietly. Thomas adjusted his speed, easing off the throttle. The tires hissed against wet pavement. The engine hummed low and steady beneath him, a sound he trusted more than most people. Then the headlights caught something on the shoulder. Movement. His body reacted before his mind did. His right foot shifted, instinct pushing him to speed up. Don't stop. That rule had kept him alive for decades. You didn't stop on empty roads at night. You didn't slow down for shapes in storms. Too many truckers learned that lesson the hard way. 4 figures walked single file along the shoulder. Soaked, hunched, barely visible through the rain. Thomas felt his jaw tighten. Not my problem. He was already passing them when the smallest figure turned its head. A child. The boy didn't wave, didn't shout, didn't run into the road. He just looked, eyes wide, frozen, terrified. Something inside Thomas snapped. He swore aloud and slammed on the brakes. Air hissed violently as the truck shuddered, hazard lights exploding into red flashes that cut through the storm. The massive vehicle skidded slightly before grinding to a stop. For a moment, Thomas just sat there, chest rising and falling hard. He had broken the rule. The passenger window cracked open an inch. Rain sprayed inside, cold against his arm. A man ran toward the cab, slipping on the muddy shoulder, hands raised high. "Please," he shouted over the storm, "we're not asking for money. My kids can't walk anymore. My little girl has a fever. Just take us somewhere with a roof." No anger, no threat, just a voice already breaking. Thomas studied him for half a second longer than necessary. The man's jacket was thin. His shoes were soaked through. His eyes weren't searching the cab for valuables. They were searching for mercy. Thomas reached down and unlocked the door. "Get in," he said. "Now." They climbed into the cab like people escaping floodwater. The woman went first, clutching a little girl wrapped in a soaked blanket. The child's head lolled against her shoulder, cheeks flushed, breathing shallow. A boy followed, teeth chattering so hard Thomas could hear it over the rain. The man climbed in last, shutting the door like he was afraid it might vanish. Thomas turned the heat all the way up. Warm air flooded the cab, fogging the windows almost instantly. Steam rose from wet clothes. The smell of rain, dirt, and cold filled the space. No one spoke. The truck pulled back onto the highway, red hazard lights blinking in the mirrors like a warning to a world that hadn't stopped for them. After a mile of silence, Thomas reached for a paper bag on the dashboard and tossed it back. "Eat." The man hesitated. Then, carefully, he opened the bag. He broke the sandwiches in half, handing the larger pieces to the children first. The woman tried to protest, but he shook his head gently. Thomas watched the reflection in the windshield. That told him everything. "Where were you headed?" Thomas asked, eyes fixed on the road. "North," the man replied quietly. "Apple Valley, seasonal work." A pause. "We lost our place this morning." No story, no excuses, just facts. They drove in silence again.
The green exit sign appeared ahead. Apple Valley, 1 mile. Thomas passed it. The man leaned forward, panic creeping into his voice. "Sir, that was our exit." "I know," Thomas said. Silence tightened the cab like a held breath. The woman pulled the children closer, eyes darting toward the locked door. "I'm not dropping you on a dark street at 3 in the morning. That's not help." "Then where are you taking us?" she asked, steady but tense. "My place, 2 hours north, old house, workshop." Suspicion filled the space. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering work. Temporary. You decide after." The man swallowed. "I don't take handouts." Thomas nodded once. "Good. Before we continue, let me ask you something. If you were driving this road, in this storm, would you have stopped?" Type in the comments if you believe some risks are worth taking. And tell me where you're watching from and click subscribe button. I read every single comment. The rain thinned as the truck climbed higher. By the time the road narrowed into gravel, the storm had softened into a cold mist that clung to the trees. Dawn pressed faint color into the sky, purple, bleeding slowly into gray. Thomas slowed the truck, his pine branches brushed the mirrors. "This is it," he said. The property sat back from the road, half hidden by tall trees that had grown wild over the years. A long dirt driveway led to a house that looked like it had been holding its breath. The structure was solid, old, built when people expected homes to last longer than marriages. The paint had peeled, the porch sagged slightly on one side, and weeds choked what used to be a garden. But it was standing. The truck rolled to a stop. No one moved at first. The children were the ones who broke the silence. They climbed down carefully, boots sinking into damp earth. The boy spotted an old tire swing hanging from an oak tree, its rope frayed but still strong. "Can we?" he asked softly. Thomas nodded. The sound of laughter cut through the quiet like sunlight. For the first time since the storm, the property felt alive. The woman, her name was Claire, stood still, taking it all in. Her eyes traced the house slowly, as if she were measuring the weight of the offer being made without words. "It's big," she said. "It's empty," Thomas replied. "That's worse." He led them inside. The door creaked open, releasing the smell of dust and time. Furniture stood covered in sheets like forgotten ghosts. A calendar hung on the wall, frozen 5 years in the past. Claire noticed the details instantly. A cold fireplace, dead plants, a single mug left on a table like someone had meant to come back. This house wasn't neglected, it was grieving. "You can take the rooms on the ground floor," Thomas said. "Hot water still works, beds too. They just need air." The children didn't wait for permission. They ran ahead, voices echoing down the hallway. Thomas paused in the doorway, watching them disappear into the house. He hadn't heard that sound in years. Then he turned toward the workshop. "Come," he said to the man. "Ethan, I want to show you something." The workshop doors groaned as Thomas pushed them open. Dust hung in the air, disturbed by the morning light spilling through high windows. Tools lined the walls, old ones, heavy ones. A lathe sat near the center, rusted but intact. Workbenches bore scars from decades of honest labor. Ethan stopped cold. He didn't speak. He stepped forward slowly, like someone entering a sacred place. His fingers brushed the edge of a workbench, wiping away dust to reveal solid wood beneath. He lifted a chisel, testing its balance. His shoulders straightened. This isn't junk," he said quietly. "This is real. My father's, and his father's." Ethan turned toward him, eyes sharp now, alive. "I can bring this back. Not fast, but right." Thomas studied him for a long moment. "Good," he said, "because I'm tired of things breaking." They didn't notice the pickup truck until it roared down the driveway. New, loud, aggressive. Thomas knew the sound instantly. His son. Stephen stepped out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the truck. Designer jacket, clean boots, disdain already etched across his face. He froze when he saw the family. "What is this?" he snapped. "What did you do now?" "They're staying," Thomas said calmly. Stephen laughed. "You've lost your mind." His eyes locked onto Ethan. "Who are you?" "An employee," Thomas answered before Ethan could speak. Stephen scoffed. "This place is being sold." "Not without my signature." Stephen stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're not thinking clearly. I'll prove it." He turned and walked back to his truck. The engine roared to life, and just like that, the storm returned. Not outside, inside. Stephen didn't come back alone.
By late afternoon, 2 cars rolled down the driveway. One was his. The other carried a man in a gray coat and a woman holding a clipboard like a shield. Claire saw them first. Her body reacted before her mind did. She pulled the children closer, instinct sharp as a blade. "They're not friends," she whispered. Thomas stepped onto the porch. Stephen climbed out with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dad," he said, voice smooth, "I brought help." The man introduced himself as a representative from the county. The woman nodded stiffly, eyes already scanning the house. "There have been complaints, unauthorized occupants, safety concerns." Stephen crossed his arms. "I told you this place wasn't fit for anyone." Thomas didn't raise his voice. "It's my property," he said, "and they're invited." The clipboard woman flipped a page. "We'll need to inspect." Ethan stepped forward. "On what grounds?" Stephen smirked. "On the grounds that I asked." The inspector stepped inside without waiting for permission. Claire followed them room by room, heart pounding. Every peeling wall felt like evidence. Every creaking step sounded like a verdict. Her children sat silently on the couch, hands folded, eyes wide. They had learned how to be invisible when adults decided their fate. The woman stopped in the living room. "This wiring is old," she said. "It works," Thomas replied. She scribbled something. The man from the county glanced at Ethan. "And you're employed here?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Without documentation?" Thomas stepped in. "He's a guest." Stephen laughed quietly. "You hear yourself?" Claire couldn't stay silent anymore. "They've done nothing wrong," she said, voice steady despite the fear burning in her chest. "We were on the road. We had nowhere else." The clipboard woman hesitated. Just for a second, that hesitation angered Stephen. "They're manipulating you," he snapped. "This is exactly why this place needs to be cleared." Ethan clenched his jaw. He'd heard that tone before, the one that decided you didn't matter. The inspection ended with warnings, not orders. Not yet. Stephen wasn't satisfied. "This isn't over," he said to his father. "I'll make sure of it." As the cars pulled away, silence settled over the property again. But it wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. That night, Thomas sat alone in the workshop. The smell of oil and metal calmed him. He stared at the workbench, hands resting flat, like he was grounding himself. She didn't cry. She had learned long ago that tears never change decisions already made. Ethan read it silently, jaw tightening. "They can't do this," he said. "But they will," Claire replied. "People like that always do." Thomas took the paper, studied it, then folded it once, carefully, calmly. "No," he said, "they won't." That surprised all of them. Thomas hadn't said "won't" in years. He walked to the workshop, unlocked an old steel cabinet, and pulled out a box layered with dust. Inside were folders, receipts, letters, deeds, history. Stephen had always assumed his father was stubborn. What he never realized was that Thomas was patient. Very patient. By noon, Ethan was at the county office, not arguing, not pleading, requesting records.
property boundaries, ownership transfers, complaint histories. The clerk barely looked up. Name? Stephen Hale, Ethan said, and Thomas Hale.
That got attention. An hour later, papers slid across the desk. Ethan's eyes moved fast, then stopped. There it was, a document Stephen had buried years ago, a failed transfer attempt, an unpaid lien, a forged signature that never held up in court. Stephen didn't own what he thought he owned, not legally. Ethan didn't smile. He folded the papers carefully and walked out. Back at the house, Claire was packing again, not because she wanted to leave, because hope was dangerous. Ethan set the papers on the table. "Stop," he said. She froze. Thomas read first, then slowly sat down. "You kept everything," Ethan said to him. Thomas nodded. Stephen never understood that memory isn't paper. Paper is proof. That afternoon, Stephen returned, alone. No clipboard, no witnesses, just anger. "You've got 24 hours, he said. Then I stopped being polite. Ethan stepped forward and handed him the folder. Stephen laughed, then opened it. The color drained from his face. "This isn't," he started. "It is," Ethan said, "and the county agrees." Stephen looked at his father. "You'd turn your back on me?" Thomas's voice didn't shake. "You turned first." Stephen left without another word. That night, Claire slept without packing, for the first time in weeks. But storms don't always announce themselves loudly. Sometimes they wait. Stephen didn't sleep that night. Neither did the town. By morning, rumors had already started moving faster than facts ever did. People noticed the county vehicle parked near the Hale property. They noticed Stephen's truck idling outside the municipal building for hours. They noticed silence where there had once been confidence. By noon, the first official letter arrived. Not for Thomas, for Stephen. A notice of investigation, property irregularities, pending review. Stephen read it twice, then crushed it in his fist. He had spent years convincing himself that he had earned everything, that cutting ties had been necessary, that strength meant never looking back. But paperwork doesn't care about pride. Paper only cares about truth. Across town, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, coffee untouched. He wasn't celebrating, he was preparing, because people like Stephen never lost quietly. Claire stood near the window, watching the road like she expected something bad to appear in physical form. "He's not done," she said. "No," Ethan replied. "He's cornered." Thomas listened from his chair, hands resting on the cane he rarely used. His body was tired, but his eyes were clear. "He'll try to make me fold," Thomas said. "He always does." And right on time, the phone rang. Stephen didn't raise his voice. That was what scared Ethan most. "You think you won, but you don't know what I protected you from." Thomas closed his eyes. "Stephen," he said, "you protected yourself." A pause. Then Stephen spoke again, quieter now. "You taught me that." The line went dead. That afternoon, a black sedan pulled up near the property line. Two men stepped out. Not police, not county officials, private consultants. Stephen's last move. They walked the boundary slowly, taking photos, measuring, pretending professionalism could hide intent. Ethan approached them. "You're trespassing," he said. One of the men smirked. "We're documenting." "Then document this," Ethan replied, handing them copies of the records. The smirk vanished. They left without argument. By evening, the town knew, not everything, but enough. Stephen's reputation, carefully built, loudly displayed, started to crack. Old stories resurfaced.
deals people had questioned but never challenged. And once doubt takes root, it doesn't stop growing. That night, Thomas asked Ethan to sit with him. "There's more you don't know," Thomas said, "and if Stephen falls, it won't be gentle." Ethan listened. Thomas spoke of debts paid quietly, of people Stephen had stepped on, of favors exchanged that were never meant to be collected. "I didn't stop him," Thomas said. "That's on me." "You tried," Ethan replied. Thomas shook his head. "Trying isn't stopping." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The storm everyone felt coming was finally close, and when it broke, it wouldn't just wash things away, it would expose them. The storm didn't arrive with thunder, it arrived with paperwork. By the next morning, Stephen's office doors were still locked, but the parking lot was full. County vehicles, 2 state sedans, and 1 unmarked car that meant something worse. People stopped pretending not to notice. Inside the municipal building, files were being pulled. Old ones, the kind no one touched unless they were ready to tear a reputation apart page by page. Stephen arrived late. When he stepped out of his truck, the confidence was still there, but thinner, like armor worn too long. He nodded to people who didn't nod back. For the first time in years, Stephen felt it, control slipping. Up on the hill, Ethan watched from a distance. He hadn't planned to be there, but something told him this moment mattered. This wasn't about winning, this was about witnessing. Inside the building, Stephen was escorted into a small conference room. No speeches, no accusations yet, just quiet professionalism. That's how systems kill egos. Slowly, methodically. The questions started simple. Signatures, dates, approvals. Stephen answered smoothly at first. He always had. He knew how to talk around truth without touching it. But then they laid the documents out, side by side. The altered boundary maps, the missing disclosures, the approvals that never should have passed. Stephen stopped leaning back. He leaned forward instead. Outside, rain finally began to fall. Not dramatic, just steady, relentless. By noon, word reached the town. Administrative leave. Temporary, they said, but everyone knew what that meant. At the Hale house, Thomas listened quietly as Claire read the news from her phone. He didn't smile. He didn't look relieved. He looked older. "This is where it hurts," he said softly. Ethan didn't understand at first. Thomas continued, "When a man loses the lie he built his life on, he doesn't always fall. Sometimes he burns." That evening, Stephen showed up. No warning, no call. His truck pulled into the gravel drive like it had 1,000 times before, but this time, it felt wrong. Ethan stepped outside first. Stephen got out slowly, rain darkening his jacket. They stood facing each other in silence. "You planned this," Stephen said. "No," Ethan replied. "You did." Stephen's jaw tightened. "You think this fixes anything?" he asked. "You think the town will thank you?" "I don't care," Ethan said. "This wasn't for them." Stephen laughed once, sharp, empty. "Of course not," he said. "It's always about you two." Thomas came outside then, leaning on his cane. Stephen turned. For a moment, just a moment, the anger faltered. "You let him do this," Stephen said, "after everything I built." Thomas met his gaze. "You built on land that wasn't yours," he said. "On silence you didn't earn." Stephen shook his head. "I did what I had to." "So did we," Ethan said. The rain picked up. Stephen stepped back toward his truck. "This isn't over," he said. "You've opened doors you don't know how to close." He drove away without another word. Long after the sound faded, no one moved. Claire finally spoke. "He's dangerous now." Thomas nodded. "Yes," he said.
because he has nothing left to protect. That night, the storm worsened. Power flickered. Wind tore at the trees lining the road. And somewhere in town, a man sat alone, staring at a life unraveling, deciding what to take down with him. The house was quiet, save for the wind thrashing against the windows. Claire held the children close, whispering soft reassurances. Though she didn't need to, they already sensed the shift. Something had changed. The storm outside mirrored the storm that had finally landed inside their lives. Thomas stood by the window, cane in hand, watching the horizon where Stephen had disappeared. His face was a mask of calm, but inside 1,000 memories stirred. Years of decisions, of watching pride twist into obsession, of knowing the cost of silence. Now it had all come home. Ethan moved to the workshop, flicking the lights on. Sparks from the old lathe glinted in the shadows. "He won't stop," Ethan said, not looking up. "Not until he knows it's over." Thomas finally spoke. "He's strong, but he's reckless, and he's alone. That's the part people forget." Outside, the rain had become a steady, punishing drum. Power lines snapped in the distance, and the town was left in flickering darkness. The sound of tires on wet gravel made everyone stiffen. Stephen's truck returning, or someone else watching, waiting. But the vehicle never came. Instead, a single phone call broke the tension. Ethan answered, listening intently. When he hung up, his jaw was tight. County officials, they confirmed the lien is active. All attempts to challenge it are null. He's exposed, legally. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "So, it's done?" Thomas shook his head slowly. "It's never done until the man facing the truth decides to fall or rise from it." And rise he did, but not in victory. The next day, Stephen appeared at the town's edge, truck roaring, eyes burning with a storm no law could contain. But as he drove toward the courthouse, cameras and whispers followed him. Every business, every neighbor, every official who had once feared him now had proof of his missteps. His empire of fear was cracking. By evening, the first domino fell. A trusted partner withdrew support. A loan was frozen. A board member resigned publicly. Stephen had fought for control all his life, but control was slipping like sand through his fingers. Back at the Hale house, Thomas watched the sun cut through the storm clouds. The property, battered by wind and rain, seemed to stand taller than it had in years. The workshop, the old furniture, the empty rooms, all of it had survived because someone had chosen to protect it. Claire knelt beside the children, brushing damp hair from their faces. "You're safe," she whispered. For the first time in weeks, they believed it. Ethan placed the final folder on the table. "This is everything," he said. "Evidence, records, proof that the house and your rights belong to you." Thomas smiled faintly. Patience wins more battles than anger. And sometimes, justice doesn't roar. It waits. As night fell, the storm finally broke. Rain eased to a gentle patter. Wind softened to a sigh. Somewhere in town, a man sat alone, defeated, not destroyed, but stripped of pretense. The power he had wielded through fear and control had finally been measured against truth, and truth, unlike rage, could not be ignored. The Hale property, battered and wet, glowed faintly in porch light. Inside, laughter echoed softly as the children played. Outside, Thomas leaned against the doorframe, cane in hand, watching the sky clear. He whispered to no one in particular, but to the storm itself. Some doors, once opened, only open the way to what's meant to survive. And for the first time in a long while, peace didn't feel like a stranger. The morning after the storm, the world felt different. The air smelled of wet earth and renewal, like the rain had washed away more than just mud and leaves. Claire stepped outside with the children, their boots crunching on gravel, and looked toward the horizon. The Hale property stood strong, soaked but unbroken, as if the storm itself had tested it and failed. Inside, Thomas and Ethan were reviewing the final documents. Each folder confirmed what they already knew. Ownership was absolute, legal, unassailable. Every forged signature, every attempted transfer, every complaint Stephen had tried to weaponize was null and void. Thomas ran his hand across the table, feeling the weight of years of patience and quiet vigilance. "He underestimated us," Thomas said simply, "not because he wasn't smart, because he forgot the hardest thing to measure, the cost of a man protecting what's rightfully his." Ethan nodded, glancing out the window at the children playing on the repaired tire swing. And sometimes, the ones who rage the hardest are the ones who can't rebuild. Far away, in his truck, Stephen sat staring at the papers delivered to his office. His empire of fear had begun to crumble. No allies, no legal foothold, no reputation left untarnished. For the first time, he understood that power built on lies and intimidation was fragile, and when stripped of it, a man could only watch as the world moved on without him. Back at the Hale house, the sun finally broke fully through the clouds, painting the roof with gold. Claire brought the children inside for breakfast, laughter filling rooms that had been silent too long. Ethan worked at the workshop, tools in hand, the sound of metal on wood blending with the hum of a new generator, a rhythm of life resuming. Thomas watched from the porch, cane resting against the railing. The storm had passed, the threat neutralized, and the property, his legacy, was safe. But more than that, he realized something deeper. Survival was never about winning fights. It was about choosing which battles were worth enduring. And finally, the Hales had endured the one that mattered most. A car approached in the distance. Not a threat, not a warning, just a neighbor stopping to check in. The town had noticed what had happened. The whispers had begun. And slowly, respect, not fear, returned to the Hale property. Thomas turned back inside, taking one last glance at the workshop. Dust hung in shafts of morning light, catching on tools that had survived decades. He smiled faintly. Some things, unlike storms, only grow stronger when tested. Claire stood beside him. "Do you think he'll come back?" Thomas shook his head. "No, the storm already found him." He paused. "And storms don't return where they're no longer welcome." Outside, the children ran along the driveway, their laughter bright against the still dripping trees. Ethan's tools clinked in the workshop. The old house, battered but whole, held warmth again. And in that quiet victory, Thomas Hale finally let himself believe it. Sometimes, survival isn't about fighting the storm. It's about standing firm long enough for it to pass. The rain had stopped. The world, battered but unbroken, was waiting for the next morning. Fade out.